All right, we're going. Hello.
Hello.
So I'm here with Amanda Cesari.
Cesari.
Oh, wow, I was really off.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's the least popular option that people use when they try to. It's fine, and it's Cesari, like tomato.
Okay. Yeah. Who is also Commandosaurus on Twitter.
Amongst other names, yes.
So we were Twitter friends before we met each other in the real world. And I always think of you as your avatar, which is like the unicorn,
the little space Unikitty
from the Lego movie.
Yes, yeah. yes. Specifically, the very tiny glimpse when they're in this, when the actual spaceman gets to build the spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
Like he finally gets to build a spaceship, and it's like it's just microseconds of a shot when she's tearing through the city that you see Space Unikitty.
Oh.
And then I changed it. Yes.
Oh, that's right. Now it's like you, right?
Now it's Batgirl.
Batgirl. Yes.
I inadvertently, well, I did not. My 2-year-old inadvertently purchased Batgirl.dev for me during the .dev domain like frenzy earlier in the year. And so I was like, I should probably start figuring out how to ramp up for this. So, but I use that as well. That is also my popular coffee name.
Is Batgirl?
It's really fun to answer to Batgirl in a coffee shop. Someone's like, hey, this is for Batgirl. I'm like, oh, that's me. So yeah. So yes, it's interesting because it is, I still get widely more known as Space Unikitty, which is weird to be saying I'm known for an avatar. But we're working on that. That's a brand transition.
Yeah, I have one photo and like all my avatars across every site. When I change it, like when I get new glasses, I'm gonna have to change it, and then it'll be
a disruption. Nobody will know who you are.
No one will know who I am.
No, you can reinvent your world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I should get like a drastic haircut at the same time and like confuse all my FaceTime friends.
Yes.
Yeah. So we were Twitter friends, and I think of you as an R lady. Would you consider yourself an R lady?
I think that's part of my identity, yes.
Partially R lady?
Yeah.
And you work in other languages as well, right?
I do. So R and Python are my 2 main languages. I would say everything else is you told me I had to figure out how to do this in this language, so I can and I will based on the example you show me.
Yeah.
But I would not put it in a tongue that I speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how did you get into data science? I know like a tiny bit about your career. You were in the Navy.
I was in the Navy. Yeah. So I was in the Navy, and then So stretching back even before that, my bachelor's degree is actually in control systems engineering.
I have no idea what that is.
Control systems engineering. So control systems, it's applied linear algebra.
Okay.
It's ways that you can understand how to take different kinds of systems, like a hydraulic system and a mechanical system, break that down into state space, so into a stateless variable, and then be able to do essentially motion equations across them, so you can balance out energy across the systems.
Okay.
So highly applicable in things like robotics, right? So control systems are the things that you use to be able to figure out how to control and work across like the hydraulic system and then the mechanical system to make them work together. So that was actually my undergraduate was focusing on robotics and then environmental control systems, which at the time was when are we ever going to have wind turbines? This was a while ago, and the answer was they're too cost prohibitive. So I actually remember driving across the country and seeing my first wind turbine, I think in Kansas, and I was so excited because it was like the first commercial wind turbine I'd ever seen.
Did you like pull over and take a photo with your camera with film in it?
I did pull over and take a film. It did have a digital canister in it, it was a little bit high tech for the time. But no, I did. I was very excited, and then I proceeded to send it to everybody I knew or show them a picture of it because I was so excited about it.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, and then control systems, I was actually looking for a program so I got out of the Navy, did some consulting for a while, and then I drove around the country in my truck for a few months, which was lovely and fun. Stopped doing that and was supposed to go work for a company in New York when the 2008 collapse happened, and I was laid off before I even started. So I moved and then showed up, and they're like, well, we actually don't have this job anymore because we've lost X% of our business.
That's rough.
I was like, that would be a great time to think about grad school, which thankfully I did not pick law school at the time. I picked engineering school instead. But I was looking for schools where I could do something similar to control systems, and there's not a lot of programs. And I found a program in Vermont that had electrical engineering and was kind of in the direction that I wanted to think about moving into. And then while I was there, I met this great group of people who were working on complex systems and complex networks. And I really liked that methodology and that scale of thinking. I liked a lot of the theory and the practice and the applied work they were doing. And my mentor for my committee chairperson for my master's thesis called himself data scientist. So his name's Peter Sheridan Dodds.
2008?
2009. 2009.
So early.
2009. So yeah. So if you ever get to see, and he posts all this stuff online, which is great. So, but Peter Sheridan Dodds went to grad school with DJ Patil.
Oh, wow.
This classmate of his, which was doing this thing that they call data science. And he was like, oh yeah, that's what I do. They're applied mathematicians, right?
Yeah.
And he was one of the first, actually, he and Chris Danforth and other students and people they worked with, they did Twitter analysis in 2008 and 2009 to be able to look at sentiment. So it was some of the first work that was kind of like academic and industry happening at the same time. And that was just the graduate group that I was a part of and studying with. And as I was looking at graduating and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I actually almost switched to an applied math PhD and then looked at the curriculum required for it and did the money math. And I was like, this is not time-wise going to work for me. But the great group that I worked with, again, it was a very cross-disciplinary team. So I was able to design the rest of my master's curriculum all in computer science and in applied math and in other courses where it allowed me, really it's the foundation and kind of that choice list, because I also got, it's called a certificate in complex systems. Pretty much the track that I followed is now their PhD in data science program. So I think I was a good place at the right time with the right group of people who saw the work that was coming up, what was interesting and important. And then also gave me the flexibility to get my degree and finish in the things I was interested in, which was super empowering at the time, right? As a student doing research, like, here's what I want to be studying. And them saying, great, can we give you a grant and a fellowship to do that? Because we think that's interesting and worthwhile. You don't have to try to shove yourself in these boxes that we think that the work should be, and we want to hear your ideas. So that was, I think, that was really the foundation of all of it, was being at this group at the University of Vermont who had a flexible way of working with each other and saying, like, how can we learn and work with each other with applied math and computer science and robotics and economics and all of these different groups that came together. And towards the end, I was like, I think I'm going to do this data science thing. And the person who was my partner at the time, who's still my partner now, initially said, are you sure this is a thing? I don't know if you can get a job doing this. Right? It was kind of where we were at. I was like, I think it's a good thing. Right. And I was starting to see programs come out of the West Coast and people talking about other ways. And I'd come from consulting and analysis. And I was like, this feels like the next step up from where I was working before with MATLAB and Excel and kind of all of those ways, and taking it to the next level in a programmatic way. So that's how I kind of started off on that path, was really like graduate research built upon everything I was interested in. I got to do a summer school at the Santa Fe Institute, where it was a ton of people coming together to talk about these big ideas and all the different ways they wanted to contribute. And I think all kind of just fed into this idea of like, how can we collaboratively help people find answers using data and information, and also accepting where those limitations are. Very long-winded answer, but yes, it quite a bit.
Super interesting. I know so many people are interested in getting into the field, and it's really helpful to have a lot of different pathways. Because like when I was in undergrad, I was like, okay, there's only one way to do this thing that I want to do. I have to do X, Y, and Z in this order. Like, I have to go to the best possible grad school. I have to get my PhD. I have to become a professor. And then like at some point in grad school, because I had a lot of classmates who had like done other things and had come right out of undergrad. I think actually I might have been the only person in my cohort that came right out of undergrad. And they're like, there's so much out there. There's so many options. There's so much stuff to do. And it's scarier not to have that like rigid institutional scaffolding that you're used to. You don't have to. It's not the only way.
I'm reading Michelle Obama's book right now, Becoming. And there's this excellent, so I'm just on this section where she's talking about this, about how she is on this super linear structured path, you know, from like going to the magnet high school and then working and going and getting accepted at Princeton and then going to Harvard Law, and how she followed this very structured linear way of, and then working at a law firm in Chicago where she was from. And it wasn't until she met this person who was kind of I think she called it swerving, which I really like. She met somebody who was more of a swerver, who like didn't go on this linear path and was like, actually, let's talk about all the ways you can get from A to B, where you just might not have thought about those branches before. And I really loved that framework that she laid out, because to be honest, there's a little bit of me, I'm always a little bit jealous of the people who have had that focus for that linear structured path and framework, because for me, it's just a very different way of making decisions and thinking that just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so looking from the outside at that, it's like, oh, but that looks like it's so lovely, right? to be able to have that knowing of like, here's what's next, and here's what I'm going to do for what's next.
Yeah.
And I do think it's interesting to look at team dynamics that way.
Yeah.
When you start to talk about like, in people, not just in different roles, but like when you're building teams, people who think in those different processes of like the linear incremental steps, people who look at exponential jumps and try to figure out how to get there, like how can you blend those together to make efficient teams that can reach decisions in the same way?
Yeah, because you're a data science manager, right?
I'm actually not a data science manager right now.
Oh.
This is a fascinating thing. Yeah, so I'm actually, the group of people I work with are called developer program engineers, which is a little bit, I don't know if it's unique for Google, but when we talk about,
it might be.
Yeah, so we talk about DevRel, right? Yeah. We talk about like developer relations, and everybody knows about advocates or like advocacy. Avocados, squishy avocados, and events teams and teams that do marketing. And I don't know if I do think, and I see just off of Twitter debate, that there is some interesting conversations around if people understand that advocates are engineers, right? And data scientists and people who are, however you want to define this technical bucket, like they are those.
Yeah.
And then we have a group called developer program engineers. And so developer program engineers are even more on the kind of internal advocacy side of working with our teams here at Google. So the group of people that I work with, we partner with developer advocates in marketing and events and everyone as part of the developer relations team. But we do things like create client libraries. We create the samples for products that are looking at launching for new runtimes. And I say runtimes because I actually work with the cloud computing group. So the team that I work with does things like serverless compute. So we work with Google App Engine, Google Cloud Functions, our new containers as a service, which is called Cloud Run. We're starting to work with some more of the other products that we have that basically allowed you to be a cloud native developer. So we have a cloud code console, we have cloud build.
Oh, yeah. Cloud Shell?
Cloud Shell.
Oh, I'm such a big fan of the redesign. Yes. It's so nice.
It is awesome. It's so trying to all the things that not just help you run your code, but actually help you build everything and work within the cloud if that's what you're doing and working on. And also to help engineering teams. So we don't just build things for those teams. We're also like, we call it the zeroth customer. Zeroth customer is the teams that go and we know products coming up. So as early as we can, we start to engage with those product teams. What's the problem you're trying to solve? How can we build things to help you support that? How can we test things out before they go to customers, before you go to alpha? How can we help you understand where this might fit within where you think customers might use it versus what we know of developer communities might use it?
Yeah.
So it's kind of more of an internal advocacy focus with external understanding that I think we kind of blend really and partner really well together with developer advocates on our team, because it's just this awesome Venn diagram then of like external and internal partnership. Yeah, so I'm actually then the manager for the DPEs that do cloud compute, which was also fascinating because when I first started with that team, I was like, I come from data science and ML and AI.
Yeah.
And the manager that I was talking with was like, that's awesome, because where are all the places you think this could go? And I was like, well, if you want like a systems thinking background, here's how I think about like this graph and where this fits in with building data engineering pipelines, building intelligent applications, building even standard web frames, but looking at or web applications, but starting to understand how those processes are changing. Because I think in the data community, we have embraced and thought more about, think more about or earlier than, that's not a contentious debate I want to get into. But we run into things like asynchronous applications, streaming applications,
absolutely,
discretizing information, right? So we think more like less analog and more digital, but also understand that analog exists. And when it exists, how do you think about breaking that up and building pipelines around it? We've talked around, I mean, unfortunately, all of the water references we have for how we build things to, you know, hold information and stream information. And I think in a way that is super applicable to blending this idea of the back end of distributed computing, the front end of building web applications and things for people, and really pulling all of that together to help all of these communities understand the idea of just points in time and how they change in time, right? And so serverless is fascinating because for me, it's compute as a function of time, as opposed to you have a box. It's you have a box for a period of time that you need.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you then think about breaking up this architecture that previously you just built everything and you put it on this thing and you ran it, right? Now we're really pulling back, just like we've done with data science, of saying you used to run everything like maybe on one platform, or you ran everything on your laptop. And now you have to start thinking about scale of what do I run where does it make sense? How do I, like, what do I run versus what do I ask someone else to run? So it's organizational change and scale change and technical change.
Absolutely.
And all of those are super parallel with the cloud compute group. So yeah, I think it's been an interesting, I don't see them as separate because I see this as like, oh, this is the building block pieces. Like these are the Lego blocks that we want to make sure we're giving everybody.
Yeah.
And not just, and for me, I know you know this has applications in web dev. Have you considered this might have applications in data streams?
Yeah.
And like how can we help people understand how to break up their applications and be able to do things in a way that is cost efficient and effective?
Yeah. You don't need to be running GPU time if you're not actually training any models.
Yes.
Just use what you need.
Wouldn't that be lovely? And what are the triggers that we need for that? That's different than like if it's an HTTP call, that's great. Do we have that functionality available for you? How can we make sure that it works with things like Colab?
Yes.
Right? Or like Kaggle, so that there are other areas people are going to come to us from besides maybe the ways that you have seen customers approach us previously. If you build for that, they won't necessarily just come. That's where DevRel comes in.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it can be easy when product teams are super like excited about the thing they're building and they're like, oh, I want to build this and I want to build this and I want to build this, but will people use that? It's like a second question that is not always part of the wanting to build things discussion.
Do you find that I do that quite a bit of can you talk to me more about the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Right. And then where did that problem come from? Because I think that it's it's a lot harder building tools for people than it is giving feedback on tools that other people have built, right?
Yeah, I think part of the thing we have at Kaggle is just an embarrassment of riches because our community is so fantastic and so active and has so many different requests that they send us that a big part of it is like, okay, what's going to be the most helpful for the most people? What's going to help people like work better and more efficiently? Yeah. And then also balancing with that, like, you know, we have limited engineering time. We love to do everything, but we can't do everything. So prioritizing, and also we had sort of some big transitions in our backend. So we're doing a lot of sort of like engineering house cleaning, as it were. And being like, okay, I want this feature really bad, but I know we can hold out on it while we like build tests, I guess.
Yeah. We also are in a little bit of a period of, we have an opportunity right now on our team to address, and we're increasingly calling it just scale debt. Like we went from 1 to N people, and when it was one person and they were dealing with all of these different parts, the process in the organization they had was fine.
Yeah.
But when we have now a team of about 60, right, we are actually not efficiently using everyone's time best. So how do we, as engineering management, leadership engineers on the team, go through and actually pull out and understand, here's what we should be spending time and focus on, and push back on requests for, can you come do a community event? Can you come do these things? We're like, we would love to do that, but if we don't do this first, we won't be able to help you with all these other things more efficiently. So I do think it's always hard to try to explain it to people, like, you're not going to see anything, right? But we promise it'll be more and better, and you'll get more from us in the future if this is what we focus on now.
It's like a duck, just like serenely gliding and then under the water.
Yes.
Little feet are going real fast. And I think this is the same conversation that, data science teams are having, because I don't know, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and I mean, there's still people who are like the data scientists for their company, but teams are starting to scale. We're starting to see like larger and larger groups, places like Lyft, who has, I don't know, dozens and dozens and dozens of data scientists just working away. How do you make sure everyone's working together and you're not repeating a labor? And
yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually what my talk is about on Friday at SSDS.
This will actually go up on Monday, but
superb. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask.
Okay.
But I can find out. If not, it's scaling from 1 to N and M to N for data teams. So looking at the idea of when you have the worst thing happen to you as a sole data scientist at a company, which is you're super successful, and then everybody wants everything from you.
Yeah.
How do you think about organizational structure and change, technical structure and change, and then like how do you make the buy, build, hire decisions for your team?
Yeah.
And what are the risks and trade-offs that you're making as you're moving up with those? Because I don't feel like I think about that or talk about that enough, but that is something that I think when you can be more intentional about that, when you're making those decisions, as opposed to being more reactive, that can help pay off. And like, if you have that, like those few, like 5 seconds to pause and kind of maybe lay out some of those thoughts and do some research, that's something that we necessarily don't learn about as like engineering managers or people who are scaling and building teams, unless you've been through it. And then you're like, oh no, we need to talk about this first.
Some hard won lessons.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to kind of lay out some of those, and from some friends in industry as well, as to how they went about and approached it. And then just in general, when you're thinking about those different decisions, like how do you make those decisions? Who do you talk to when you're trying to make those decisions? So that way you can make better informed choices, not just parse through the documentation yourself, which is unfortunately my default status.
Yeah.
And I think the human connection piece is a part that we really could talk about more, because we have lovely people who want to help talk with everybody about those as they can. Yeah.
And it's just the social entropy has been sort of a repeated theme in my own work. So I was doing a lot of work on sort of reproducibility, especially in science, and everyone is interested in the idea of reproducibility. I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing. I do that, but there's other things that I could be doing that are directly rewarded. And reproducible work is like kind of nice to have. Maybe some reviewers will mention it, but there's no like social penalty for me not doing it. And it's this sort of self-perpetuating cycle, especially in machine learning research. And I think people are getting better, but it's still not, a standard. And like getting to the point where you have that standard in the community is just so difficult.
Which I think that there's, and then a lot of discussion around that is, how is it that we then, when we do standardize it, like where does that standard come from, right? Does it come from something like IEEE? Does it come from something like the EU or from legislation, right? How is it that we reach that kind of like, we need to do this in response here? And I agree with you that I think that it's very challenging for, it's really challenging for prioritizing change in workflows when we don't know what the incentive is, besides the like, this is a good reason to do it.
Yeah.
Right. It's like open source contributions. Like,
yes. Yeah.
Like everybody knows that we all depend on all of these things, but how are we actually able to like help value those contributors and those maintainers who do all of that work for us and that we love, and actually like help support them in ways besides hugs. Hugs are great, right?
Yes.
Like verbal hugs, GIF hugs, all those are really great. But how can we help kind of bring a little bit of like structure to that?
Yeah.
I think reproducibility is interesting because it fits in very well with like privacy regulations right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So I think I expect that more of that will start coming to industry as more of those start moving through and we start seeing decisions that impact our workflows and kind of necessitate the work that we know needs to be done now, but helps us prioritize them when we're making roadmaps.
Yeah, just you got limited amounts of everything, and what buckets do you put your beans in?
Yeah. I think that I'm hopeful that some of the voices of the people who are working in the community can help highlight we know this is a good idea to do now in order to like decrease risk in the future. So if we can do this work now, we will be actually saving ourselves from headaches in the future. So
Yeah.
can we just try to do that now for the reason of like, this is good for you, good for the company, good for ourselves. And in addition for ways that it like kind of helps, I think, in other areas too.
Yeah.
And I hope for industry for that of it is at some point, if it costs somebody money, we will be able to then say, oh yeah, this is something we should spend time on. Yeah.
That's the carrot.
Yes, before the stick hits.
Before we wrap up, because I don't want to keep you too long, I know you're super busy. We're both giving talks at a conference this week, which we need to finish. And you're doing one of the silly talks as well, right?
I am. So we have a Pi Ladies, Our Ladies, Women in Machine Learning and Data Science super meetup on Friday, which I'm super excited about.
Friday or Thursday?
Friday.
We'll change that in my calendar. I'll be there.
It is on Friday.
Okay.
We have it on Friday specifically because the conference banquet was on Thursday. And we wanted to make sure the most people, and then Friday there was nothing planned for the conference. So we did it on Friday. We have some awesome people. You are giving a talk. There's a lot of Googlers, like Aja Hammerly is coming to give a talk, which is awesome. But it's
Thagmatizer on Twitter.
Thagamizer, yes. Thagamizer is giving a talk. Dr. Donna Malieri, I butcher her last name. She's fantastic. She formerly came from Microsoft. She's now here. She's a PM now on the serverless team. Who else is? Gabby Gutierrez is coming up from Our Ladies Global.
Oh, that's exciting.
And then the Nolases are closing us out.
Yeah.
But here's what, I don't know if everybody realizes this. So I reached out and asked them, I've always wanted to see Heather and Jacqueline at the same event, and I haven't seen them yet. They're writing each other's talk, and then they're going to give it without having looked at it before they show up. So they will be giving lightning talks that the other person wrote and then delivering them in person.
That's so exciting.
My talk will be about how I do not do it all, about like the army of people that help do everything in my life, including like very shortly, how do you hire a nanny in Washington State?
That's good to think about.
Yes. How do you find a house cleaner? How do you do all, like when you have access and privileges and resources, how do you use these to be able to focus on things that you want? And then also like, just to kind of open up a little bit for the people, like, how do you do all these things? I'm like, I don't do all of these things. Other people help me with them. So yeah. Do you know what you're talking about yet?
Nope. My two top choices right now are how to identify farm animals, or sort of a quick bird's eye view of all of the neural language modeling stuff that's going on right now, because it's a super hot topic. And I think a lot of the work is not something I personally would choose to use in a professional setting yet at this point. I don't want to throw shade on anybody, but yeah. Like, I think some things are going to be super helpful for people to use right now, and some things like maybe hold off a little bit, wait for another couple conference rounds, see what shakes the top.
Yeah, that's fascinating. The context of this is the Ministry of Silly Talks.
Yes.
Right, yes. So it's 5-minute talks about whatever anybody wants to talk about. So I think there's a variety of things that are coming out, which I'm super excited to see what shakes out.
If I'm super tired, it'll be the farm animal talk. If I have a little bit more juice in the tank.
Can I convince you to give it Ignite style? Are you familiar with Ignite style?
No.
20 slides, auto advance, 5 minutes total. So you set your slides to auto advance every 15 seconds.
Maybe. Yeah. I'll see. I've got some time blocked out this afternoon to do talk giving stuff. So
okay.
I'll figure it out by Wednesday.
Okay. It's part of our DevRel Theater Sports that we are thinking about working on as well. We can chat more about that.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Okay.
And then did I already ask you if there's anything you wanted to share with the Kaggle community?
No, you didn't.
Is there anything you'd like to share with the Kaggle community before we wrap up?
Sure. I guess one thing is that we were talking earlier about like, what are all the different roads into data science to data engineering? Like, what are all the different roads that you can take to get to the place that you want to go? And I found, like, I think we're at the point now where both that linear structure and people who swerve have a place within industry. What I've seen most frequently is really like that hardest first job, right? Having that first job, getting that first, like just that position and title on your resume as a part of the body of work that you're doing. There's a lot of great groups that are working to help with that from a lot of different avenues, which I think are fantastic. But I would say if that is a struggle that you are facing, the biggest advice that I can give that this has helped me the most, and I feel like in the community we've chatted about this, really finding like cheerleaders, people who can help connect you, like advocates, and like not just mentors who will sit and tell you like, here's what I think you should do based on my experience, which is probably what I'm doing right now, but like actually having advocates who are like, I would like to help introduce you to this person, right? Like I would like, there's something important that's coming up that I think you should know about. There's an opportunity to give talks or to do something or to contribute. There's going to be a sprint working on this open source package. I feel like this would be a good next step for you for these reasons. Like actually having someone who can point you in that direction, I think would be helpful. And we are officially getting kicked out of Google Live, which is you open the door.
Call it there. So
That
thanks
sounds
so
good.
much for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'll see you around.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.